Tulip Mania and the madness of crowds. The world-famous Dutch tulip bubble of the 1630s is a fantastic example of human psychology in action. It's generally considered to be the first speculative asset bubble in human history. It grew and it grew and it grew and it finally popped. And when it popped, it devastated the entire economy. Mark Twain famously said that history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And understanding the mechanics of the tulip bubble will help you understand all market bubbles. So, how did it happen? Here's a very basic breakdown. For the first time, tulips were introduced into the Netherlands. They looked really cool. Everybody wanted them. But unlike today, where you can just stroll on down to the flower store and buy yourself some tulips, they were very, very rare back then. You had to grow them. So the demand for tulips was much, much higher than the supply of tulips. So let's say you wanted some tulips just like everybody else, and you found out that your next door neighbor had just planted some tulips. The only person in town who was actually growing tulips. We can imagine they had some kind of mad connection where they got the tulip seeds. And so you know they are growing tulips before anybody else knows. And you very much want some tulips when they are fully grown. And at this point, let's imagine you want them just because you want them. Maybe you want to give them to a pretty lady or something and hopefully get laid. So you ask your neighbor if they'll sell you some tulips when they're grown. And they say, oh yeah, sure, no problem. But you're kind of worried. Suppose your neighbor doesn't remember and they don't keep their promise and they maybe sell them to somebody else and forget about you. So you get an idea. You call your lawyer friend and drop a contract, and you pay your neighbor $100 to sign the contract. And the contract gives you, the holder of the contract, the legal right to buy tulips from your neighbor for $10 a tulip. And the contract gives them the legal obligation to sell you those tulips for $10 a tulip. So you're both happy. You both sign the contract, you pay them $100, and you're satisfied imagining the future when you can get some tulips. So you head on down to your local bar to have a celebratory drink. Everybody at the bar is talking about these awesome tulips, and you have a contract in your pocket that guarantees you're actually going to have some tulips in the future. By the way, this contract is called a futures contract, a contract that gives you the right to buy and them the obligation to sell something that doesn't exist yet, but at a specified price. So you're at the bar, feeling good, enjoying your drink, and people ask you why you're in such a good mood. And you show them your tulip contract. Somebody asks how much you paid for that contract. You tell them $100. Now let's suppose this makes you the hero of the bar, the only buddy in town who's going to get some tulips in the future. Everybody wants to be your friend. All the other bar patrons wish they were as smart as you. But there's nothing anybody can do because there's no more tulip growers in town. But then somebody says, hey man, I'll give you $200 for that contract. And you say, no man, I really want these tulips. They will help me get laid in the future. But then they offer $300 for the contract. Maybe they're a legit business person and they have a plan to pay you $300 for the contract, buy the tulips for $10 a pop, and then sell them for $50 or even $100 a pop, and they'll make a huge profit. And so let's say you decide that $300 is a fair price. So you sell your contract for $300. After all, you only paid $100 for it a couple of hours ago, and now you're making a profit of $200 without really doing anything. But suppose the same thing happens later. Suppose that guy sells the contract to somebody else for $500. Pretty soon word gets around town. Pretty soon that contract sells for $1,000, then $2,000, then $3,000. And what does the final owner of that contract do when he actually buys the tulips for $10 a pop? He sells them to tulip growers. And so now there's more people growing tulips. And because there are more people growing tulips, there's more people that are selling these tulip futures contracts. And all of those other futures contracts take off like the first one. They sell for $100, then $500, then $1,000, then $5,000. People are buying and selling these futures contracts and getting rich. This is when something interesting happens. Nobody is buying this contract because they actually have a plan to buy some tulips. The only reason people are buying and selling these tulip contracts is because they want to get rich. This is called the greater fool theory of investing. You're a fool if you buy a contract to buy some tulips and that contract costs you $2,000. But if there's a greater fool than you somewhere, you can still make a profit. This whole process went on in the Netherlands for about 4 years. It was getting so crazy that people were borrowing against everything they had, their houses and their farms, just so they could buy these tulip contracts for thousands of dollars, just so they could hopefully sell them to a greater fool for more money than they paid. But eventually, all bubbles will pop. You eventually run out of new people that are willing to buy the contracts at such a high price. And when that happens, the prices collapse. And when that happens, the prices collapse. And they usually collapse very, very quickly. Imagine taking out a loan against your house or your farm, using all that money to buy a tulips contract and have the price collapse the next day. This is why when the tulip bubble collapsed, it ruined the entire economy. So much money was tied up in this tulip bubble that when it collapsed, all that paper wealth just vanished. Like we said earlier, this is considered the first ever market bubble. But it certainly wasn't the last. These bubbles happen again and again and again because of human nature. They've happened before and they'll happen again. And just like the game of musical chairs, if you're the only one standing when the music stops, you're in big trouble. If you'd like to learn more about human nature so you can thrive in our modern economy, please visit mindpersuasion.com. Check out the links below. And because we make videos almost every day, please subscribe so you can continue to learn more. Let us know what you think in the comments. Thank you for watching.